Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to open up by asking the audience to please raise your hand if you yourself have ever found yourself in a position of being a caregiver to a family member or a friend. So it's a lot of you guys. And now raise your hand if you've also, while you were a caregiver, found yourself to be a patient as well, simultaneously. Yeah, so it's a lot of you. So in the US, there's more than 48 million family caregivers, and it has a significant impact on the US economy. Susan was telling me right before this that it's about $600 billion, did I get that right, in unpaid costs. That it's basically they're doing free labor, right, for the healthcare system. And it impacts so many of us, and I really wanted to contextualize that because even if you yourself are not a caregiver, you probably know one. And it's really important to show up and be there for people who find themselves in that situation. So to that end, I would love to ask each of our panelists what inspired them to become an advocate for health and specifically caregiving. So I'll start with Dr. Dorfman.
So for me, I was 13 years old. We had just come to America as refugees. My father was the only person working, and he had something on his back. And it started to bleed, and he went to the doctor, and the doctor sent him to an oncologist, and the oncologist said, "You have stage 4 melanoma, and you have 9 months to live." My mother wasn't working, we didn't speak English very well, and it was the absolute scariest time of my life. And I had watched my mother search. There were no internet places to go and search. There was no social media. There was no abundance of information. She went to libraries. She called every hospital institution trying to find the best care for my dad, and my dad became part of a clinical trial. And it was thanks to that clinical trial that he lived another 39 years.
Wow.
And I'm a doctor of health administration, not a medical doctor. I was never smart enough and don't like blood, but was never smart enough to be a medical doctor. But I said, that is what I want to do. I want to be in the medical field. I want to help people. I want to bring information. Speak louder. I am so sorry. I'm going to speak louder. Bring information out there.
Wow, that's really inspiring. Oh, sorry. And then I hit my microphone. Paige, so I know that when we asked you to join this conversation, you had kind of a revelatory moment. Would you mind telling everybody sort of that process?
Yeah. I'm really honored to be here today to talk about both receiving care and giving care. I don't think that I considered myself a caregiver for a very long time. I think it's hard to consider yourself a caregiver, especially when it's your partner that you're giving the care to. So often, I think we kind of glamorize or kind of put caregivers on this pedestal where we say, you're so selfless or you're so strong. But I think what we're really saying is, we're so thankful that you're doing this job that we're not going to really help you do. And I didn't really realize I was a caregiver for my partner until I was drowning and until I was in a really dark place. And I think that there's probably so many of us that also feel like that. And it wasn't until I was asked to participate on this panel. I recently had a surgery, and I think I was asked to talk about receiving care. And I said, I actually think that it's important for us to have a conversation, if we're going to be talking about caregiving, with the caregiver. Let's give the caregiver the voice. And I think that that's so important because so often we feel so voiceless. We feel like our heart is walking around outside of our chest, and there is nothing that we can do to help this other person that we want to help so badly. And so I'm really grateful that I get to talk about not only receiving care, but being a caregiver today. Thank you so much.
Of course. And Dr. Lakshmin, you also had an interesting perspective on how you find yourself to be a caregiver in both the professional and personal arenas. So I'd love if you could share that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my clinical work is as a perinatal psychiatrist. So I take care of women who are dealing with things like postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety. So the caregiving parenting conversation is something that is constantly happening between me and my patients in my practice. But I will say that as my practice has grown over the past 7 or 8 years, my patients are moving more into this midlife space as well, where they are in the panini generation, where they're taking care of their own parents that are aging, as well as their kids who are small or sometimes getting older as well. And so, I'm seeing really what Paige talks about too, of this sense of like, especially as women caregivers, it's easy to put ourselves last if we're even on the list at all. And there's a lot of this martyring that's happening, where you get your value out of being the one who saves the day, the one who's doing everything. Really, you're the CEO, you're the administrative assistant, you're the marketing department, you're the trash collector. You're doing everything, and you're burnt to a crisp. But yet you're waiting for somebody to step in and say, "Here, I see you're drowning. I see you're drowning. Let me help you." But the reality is that, with my patients, it's like no one's coming to save us. Like, we actually have to do it for ourselves. And from a personal standpoint, I'm kind of approaching that panini generation as well, like thinking about my own parents who live across the country, and I'm actually currently pregnant right now with twins. So it's really on my mind, actually, like just the ways in which, we put so much value actually on that pregnancy period. And we talk about like this magical time and this special time, and your body's doing so much. But we don't do that then for the rest of life. And actually, when we're looking at taking care of elderly folks, or when we're looking at taking care of folks that have medical issues, you don't get that societal support. There's not as much like language for it. So I think it's just so important that we're having this conversation, really.
Yeah. And I love that you call it the panini generation, because we all know the sandwich generation, but panini implies pressed, like you're being pressed from both sides. I don't know if that was intentional for that word choice.
I actually can't take credit for it. That's been around in the zeitgeist for years.
First time I heard it, so I love that.
too.
Yeah, we're gonna start. It needs a rebrand, panini. Okay. So Dr. Dorfman, I'd love to, because your story is one of caregiving many, many years ago. And then, we're bringing it to today. So how have you seen the role of caregivers evolve with shifts in healthcare and technology? Like, how has that changed?
I think it's become much more of a burden. So with so much information, I love stats, I love numbers. And over the last 20 years, we have seen health information double every 7 months. So imagine how much information, how much bad information and good information is out there. Health insurers are not paying and reimbursing. If you are part of a large health system, to actually get to talk to a doctor and not have to say operator, 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 operator. I would say the F word here, but I'm not going to 100 times. It's actually, technology has taken so much away from the personalization of care. It has taken time away. It has put the burden on the family. And unlike a job that we go to where we say, hey, we're trained to do something, when a loved one gets diagnosed, when you marry someone that has a health condition, when someone falls sick and that burden starts to rest on your shoulders, you didn't ask for it. You didn't want that job. For those of you who've raised your hands and said you were a caregiver, how many of you have gone into the bathroom, locked the door, gotten to the shower, and cried? My father recently passed. My mother lives with me right now. I'm an only child, and culturally, it is against our culture to have your parents being taken care of by someone other than you. That burden, that pain, that worry about them. When my father was sick and he didn't speak English very well, and we gave him a new iPhone, and the only button he knew how to press was mine. So I'd be sitting in a meeting as a CEO trying to work, and I'd get a phone call from the hospital, and it was my dad every 3 minutes. And the only thing he would say to me is, "Can mommy call me?" That's hard. That's hard. So I share all of this because there's so much more burden on us as caregivers, and as patients, we don't want that burden to be on someone that we love. So there's a duality there, and I do believe that if we use technology in the right way, if we are using information in the right way, if we are enabling and preparing, making things make sense when somebody gets diagnosed, I think those are really critical things for us to be able to do.
I was not expecting you to say that it was worse. That's really, that's sad. How can we improve that is my natural next question.
Yeah. There's so many ways that we can improve it because it is so bad. But I would say 2 things that we could do as the healthcare industry, whether you are a doctor, a nurse, whether you are a insurer, whether you are a hospital system, a pharmaceutical company. Information. Information is the first step to health. Anticipate our needs. By the time we become advocates and we have a voice, we're fighting for something. Why do we need to fight? Why can't you anticipate the needs? Why can't you know that the minute I get diagnosed, the minute I hear the word cancer, I'm not hearing anything else. I'm going to go home, and I'm not going to have any idea what you just said to me. Why can't you understand that when I go home and I have to go and file a claim with the insurance company, I'm going to need to have all of this paperwork? Help me figure it out. Why can't you tell me that if I'm on Medicaid, that actually in New York, as a mother, a daughter, a child, a wife, I can actually get paid up to $25 an hour, 24 hours a day for taking care of my significant other or my parent.
Wow. Yeah. And you mentioned advocacy. So I'm going to ask Paige, through your personal experience and advocacy efforts, what have you learned about the types of support that caregivers need most?
I want to go back to really quickly just what you mentioned and what you mentioned. Before we can even get to advocacy, I think it's just so important to just sit in the reality of being able to acknowledge that it's okay to admit that being a caregiver is really hard. I don't think we can become advocates until we can admit to ourselves that this is really hard. I love that you said, no one is coming to save you. I was waiting for a long time for someone to come and save me. I remember talking to my therapist. I specifically sought out a therapist that specialized in one of the mental health disorders that my husband recently was diagnosed with. For background, my husband is a type 1 diabetic and recently was diagnosed with multiple mental health diagnoses. And so I specifically sought out a therapist that specialized in that. And I go to her twice a week, and week after week, I'm meeting with her, and I'm waiting for her. I also go to his therapist with him sometimes, and I'm waiting for someone to save me. I'm reaching out, being like, I am struggling. Isn't it clear that I need help? I'm the caregiver. I'm his only true support day in and day out. And I think I needed to realize no one is coming to save me. I have to save myself. And what you mentioned, which I think is so important, is that why aren't they anticipating that there is so much to learn? Whatever it is, whether it's mental health, whether it's cancer, you are learning a new language. It is so overwhelming, and no one's going to teach it to you but you. I had to take on, it was like another job, another full-time job to learn about diabetes, about his mental health diagnoses that are incredibly complicated. And that was something that you have to either opt into or opt out of. And like you said, which is so beautiful to just say it how you said it. Honestly, I'm sitting here and I'm like, thank you for saying that, because I think we hold on to so much shame. Like, am I allowed to feel like this? Is it okay that I feel like this? Yes, you're allowed to have these big feelings. You are not a bad person. You are a human. It's okay. And so, like, finally admitting, like, I do carry these feelings, that was liberating for me. It changed everything for me. So thank you both. That's a huge part of this conversation. And you can't become an advocate until you first hold space for yourself.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's huge.
Yes. And then also, you know, I'm hearing you guys talk about this. You're still human, right? So you still have your own health, potentially issues going on. It also takes a toll on you mentally, right? And that's a really, really hard thing. So you're taking care of somebody else, but your own health is kind of slipping. So Dr. Lakshmin, like, what kind of coping mechanisms, right? Like mental health, you got to fill your own cup. What sort of advice would you have for somebody going through this?
Yeah. So I think that, you know, everything that we've been talking about, just sort of echoing the fact that nobody else is coming to save us. You really have to take the burden of responsibility of your own mental health on as an individual. And I know that that can sometimes feel like another task and another thing that's not fair. And the reality is that it is up to us. So what I like to tell my patients is you have to start small, especially if you're someone who's in a caregiver role. You probably are used to thinking of yourself as a little bit like a superhero or superwoman, but the reality is you are human. And so we as a culture have not done a great job of normalizing accepting help and receiving help. I can't think of how many times where somebody has like offered to hold a door for me or to pick up a box for me. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. When it's like, in reality, it would be so much easier just to say yes. So, you know, even just things like, I was in a therapy session with a patient, and we were chatting about something unrelated, when she just kind of mentioned like, oh, you know, my husband's gonna be away for one night next week. My sister offered to come over and help with bedtime and bath, but it's just one night, so I'll be fine. And I was like, you know, to my patient, I was like, but she offered to come help. And my patient, you know, she kind of said again, no, I'll be fine. I'm fine. It's just one night. And we kind of got into it, and I was like, but you know what? This is your sister offering a bid for community. This is her saying, hey, I want to be a part of your system, of your family system. And when you reject her, when you say, no, it's fine, that is a rejection. So I think what we actually need to do is to start practicing receiving help, even when we feel like we don't need it. Like, even when it feels a little bit extra, just say yes. Because it's actually in the same way that we need to build boundaries, we also need to build the same muscle for receiving help, because it feels so unnatural to us. But in reality, it's something that if you start doing it when you don't, quote unquote, need it, then it will be so much easier in those times where you find yourself in a pinch or you're really kind of in more of a crisis state, that it's easier to ask. So I often say to my patients, like, why are we waiting until we're like on the bathroom floor crying? Like, let's start making this part of our daily lives.
Yeah. You know, I was going to ask, and I don't know if anybody can speak to this, what can family members, communities do to step up to support caregivers? But I'm also really interested in tackling this from a systemic level, because it sounds like it really is starting there. Paige, was there anything, I mean, from the community level, family member level, people, ways that they showed up that we can, like, you know, hopefully mimic in our own lives?
I'm so glad that you went there, because I wanted to just say, like, I wanted to go off of that anyway. Receiving help is so hard, and I'm the oldest of 3 sisters, and I'm so used to being in that role of taking care of everyone and taking care of everything. And it was actually a therapy session where my little sister's therapist said, your sister is now an adult, she's 21 years old, and she can be there for you. You don't have to be the mom anymore. And that was life-changing. And I remember when I first introduced what my partner and I were going through to my little sister, And I remember being like, I can either pretend like nothing is happening and we can pretend like we're perfect, or I can really let her into this experience and be real and honest and show her that relationships are hard and life is hard. And it was truly this like sliding door moment in my life, in me and my partner's life, in me and my sister's life. And that changed everything, and it allowed her to come in and help me and help him. And it also showed me that it's safe to not have it all together all the time. And so now it transformed my relationships with everybody else. So now I have friends that I can truly reach out to on a regular basis and say, like, I am not okay. And it's so corny, that quote, like, it's okay not to be okay. I don't know if people here don't believe that. I didn't believe that. I felt like, okay, that's for other people. I have to be okay all of the time. I have to hold it together. You don't. And people actually really like you a lot more and love you when you're not always perfect and you're not okay all the time. It changed everything for me.
Yeah. Dr. Dorfman, so I'd like to ask you, the stories we tell are really, really important. And I think that affecting change really starts from the stories that we're telling. So from a health communications perspective, how can companies and industries contribute to shifting the narrative around caregiving? And have you seen, examples of this that you feel have done this well?
So no one has done this well, because we're all sitting here complaining about how we're not seen as caregivers.
You keep it real.
There is no one that does this well. For all the men and all the women, I want to make sure that you are heard and seen. Men, as much as women, are incredible caregivers, caretakers, and care partners. When you're in that role, there's a sense of desperation. There's a sense of aloneness. There's a sense of fear, lack of control, not being able to help the one you love. There's stress, there's anger, there are all of these feelings. And our health system, not just our health system, but in the entire world, I've never seen a health system that actually helps caregivers with their needs. Mm-hmm. Because if they are able to take care and help support, if they themselves are mentally able to do that, then they can provide better care and the outcomes are going to be much better. So as an industry, we have to stop looking at ourselves as individual, siloed revenue generators. We need to look outward and see what can we do to provide support. Somebody asked me, like, is there a company that does it well? The answer is no. No one really does it well. But if I was to look at an agency that does it better, you will be surprised by what I'm going to tell you. State Medicaid. State Medicaid is the only set of agencies that actually provide caregiver support, time to themselves, emotional, mental health, financial support and health. In New York, for example, you can actually select your own caregiver and they can get paid 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Shame on us if Medicaid is the best example of caregiver support. So we should pay attention to them. If there are anybody from pharma, insurance, any industry, don't be ashamed, raise your hand. I'm going to raise my hand. We can all do better. We have to do better. Information is the first step in health. Information is the first step in hope. Mm-hmm. And for caregivers, hope is that.
Yeah. So I know that we're getting low on time, and speaking of information, Paige, you have some tips for caregivers that you had wished you had known a year ago. Would you mind sharing those to help close us out?
Yeah, definitely. I took notes because I wanted to get it right, but I will say over the last year, I lost myself to being a caregiver, and I don't think you realize how much you can get sucked into that. And so if you're in that state right now, if you are in that darkness and there is not a light at the end of the tunnel for you, I just want you to know that I felt that, I was you, and I am so happy to know that today I don't feel like that any longer, but I didn't feel like that for a long time, so I hope that these tips can help you too. The first tip for you, and I'll go quick because I know the clock is ticking.
You can go over, it's okay.
But my first tip is that, one, it's okay to be in denial at first. Please be kind to yourself, exactly like what you said. You know, this is not what you expected your life to look like. Take the time that you need. Don't jump into advocacy mode or superhero mode. Just, it's okay to be in denial at first. Step number 2, please set yourself up for success. If you can, seek out help. Therapy is incredible. If you don't have access to therapy, sorry if this is not what you want to hear, but ChatGPT has changed my life.
Mine too.
Right? ChatGPT has really been like a supplement to my therapy. So I love that so much. Step number 3, I know that there are going to be days, like you've mentioned, crying on the bathroom floor. You just want to rot on the couch. You don't want to move. Please move your body. Oh my God, movement will change how you feel. Get that energy shaking. YouTube is free and so accessible. Yoga with Adriene has changed my life. Like, I have done 10 minutes a day, and just that. Also, look up somatic shaking. Try it. Shake your body. It will really just, changes my life. Number 4, I know it's so scary to talk about this. I already mentioned this. You don't have to be perfect, but I hid what I was going through from my family, from my friends for so long. And my partner really inspired me. He is so open and so vulnerable with his story. I wish that he could be here today. But as I mentioned, he's a type 1 diabetic, and he had a horrible night last night with his blood sugars. It was over 300 all night long, and so he was like, I can't be here today. That's the reality of being a caregiver of someone you love with a chronic illness. But he is so open with his story, and he encouraged me, talk to your friends, talk to your family, don't stay on this isolated island all by yourself. And it was so scary for me. But as soon as I started opening up little by little, and I didn't tell everybody, your story is sacred, but I started to figure out who I could trust with this story. And it has been so liberating to be able to talk to my friends and family and to have certain people tell me certain things. Like, I've had a friend say to me, yeah, this is really hard. I can't imagine what you're going through. And that was so validating for me, where I'm like, this is really hard. Thank you. And I had another friend tell me, like, it's not going to always be like this, Paige. It's going to get better. And I needed to hear that too. And so having your friends that you know, like, hey, this is my inspiration friend, okay? I'm going to call her when I need that. Or this is my friend that's just going to sit on the bathroom floor with me. You know, life-changing. Find your people. And learn as much as you can, whether it's cancer, whether it's mental health. Please, like, I just became such a consumer. Once you're ready to, you know what really helped me? TikTok. TikTok changed my life. I just started finding as many people as I could that had the same mental health diagnosis as my husband. I felt like I was able to take on the world, because when he would tell me certain things that he was just discovering about himself, I'm like, I know exactly what he's talking about. And even his therapist and my therapist were like, wow, like, you really understand. You're able to grasp this in a way that most partners haven't been able to. And it's because I just consumed so many other people's stories on TikTok. So TikTok is really amazing. It helped me so much. This is my last one, I promise. And the last one is join in activities with the person that you're caring for. It ended up helping me so much too. One of the things that is really helpful for people that have the mental health diagnosis that my husband has is coloring. It's like an inner child thing. And so I found this on TikTok actually, and I was like, I think we should color together. And so we started coloring together nightly. And lo and behold, I never would have known this, but it actually ended up helping me and my inner child too. And it was so beautiful that this, like, simple act of getting a coloring book and us coloring and putting on vibey music just was this, like, really chill and beautiful activity for us to bond. but also really helped him and really helped me.
That's lovely.
It was so beautiful. So find what that is for you. What is your activity that you can do with the person you're caring for? Yeah, those are my tips.
Yeah, so I mean, what I'm taking away from this is the importance of community. And you're not in an island on your own. You need the support of other humans. And so I'm very grateful for the support of the humans on the stage today to have this really important conversation. So thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.